I only went to court to argue a parking ticket, nothing more. But when Judge Naomi Vega looked up from the bench, something in me shifted, quiet but irreversible. I wasn't expecting the warmth in her voice, or the way her eyes lingered just a second too long. What began as a routine hearing unraveled into a connection that would risk my reputation, break open my guarded heart, and change everything I thought I knew about love. If this story stirs something in you, and you want to hear more sensual, slow-burn queer stories, hit the subscribe button. I post daily, and it's just me here, crafting every word, every story, for you. I never expected to walk into court and leave with my life unraveling in the most delicious, terrifying way. It was a Thursday morning in early spring, the kind where the city still hadn't decided whether to warm up or stay cold out of spite. I wore a blazer I hadn't touched since grad school, and heels I instantly regretted. The traffic ticket was minor, a technicality from a temporary zone change outside my building. I knew I could fight it. I'd spent nights rehearsing my explanation, confident it would be over in 10 minutes. What I hadn't rehearsed was her. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined, more wood paneling and humming fluorescents than grand declarations of justice. I took a seat in the back row, clutching my envelope of evidence like it could shield me. That's when the bailiff said her name. All rise for the Honorable Judge Naomi Vega. And then she walked in. Not marched, not swept, just entered. With quiet authority. She was older than me, maybe mid-40s, with sharply tailored lines and an economy of movement that demanded attention without ever asking for it. Her black robe flowed as she took her seat, and when she finally looked up to scan the room, her eyes landed on me, just for a second too long. That look felt like a spotlight, like she'd peeled back every layer I'd carefully wrapped around myself since college. I looked away, cheeks flushing, and pretended to reread my paperwork. When my name was called, my legs resisted. I walked forward, pulse hammering, and stood at the defendant's table like a schoolgirl presenting a late assignment. Judge Vega raised a brow as she adjusted her glasses. Miss Rivera, you're contesting a citation from February 19th? Yes, Your Honor, I said, hating how my voice trembled. Go ahead. I launched into my explanation, calm, detailed, well-practiced. I even had photos. But halfway through, her gaze shifted from my evidence to me, and stayed there. It wasn't unprofessional, not exactly, but there was a stillness in her that made me feel like I was the one under review, not the paperwork. When I finished, she paused before speaking. You're a social worker? I blinked. Yes, ma'am, family services. A nod. Something softened in her expression. Your documentation is thorough. The citation is dismissed. Relief swept over me, but it was quickly replaced by a confusing tangle of nerves as she added, Thank you for the work you do. It's rarely appreciated. I murmured something, I don't even know what, and turned to leave. But as I passed the bench, I could feel her eyes on me. Heavy, curious, unsettling in a way that made my skin hum. Outside the courtroom, the city had brightened. I stood on the courthouse steps for a long minute, envelope still clutched in my hand, trying to exhale whatever had just happened. It was nothing, a look, a courtroom crush. These things pass. Except it didn't. That weekend, I went to a small bar near my apartment to meet a friend for drinks. She was late. I was scrolling through my phone, pretending not to notice how alone I looked, when I heard a voice ask, Is this seat taken? I looked up. Judge Vega, Naomi, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket that seemed designed to challenge everything I thought I knew about authority. Her hair, pulled back in court, was down now, sleek waves brushing her shoulders. She looked dangerous, and that terrified me more than anything. My voice betrayed me again. No, it's not. She slid onto the stool beside me, ordered whiskey neat, and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, without turning, she said, "You don't recognize me, do you?" I let out a breathy laugh. "I do, which is why this feels incredibly inappropriate." She finally faced me, one corner of her mouth lifting. "Then we're on the same page." "What are you doing here?" I asked, my throat dry. She took a sip of her drink. "Unwinding. It's been a long week." "You came to a bar in my neighborhood to unwind?" Naomi shrugged, unconcerned. "You're assuming I came here for you." The moment stretched, taut, fraying. I swallowed hard. "Did you?" Her gaze pinned me again. That same quiet force. "Would it scare you if I said yes?" Yes. God, yes. Because she was a judge. Because she was older. Because she was everything I wasn't. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I turned my body toward her and asked, "Isn't this crossing some kind of line?" Her reply was quiet, careful. "We're not in court anymore." The bar noise blurred behind us. She asked about my job, and I answered, cautiously at first, then openly. She didn't make small talk. She asked meaningful things. About burnout. About why I chose social work when it so clearly broke me sometimes. And when I asked what she feared most about her job, she looked away and said, "Losing compassion." She walked me home. It wasn't far, but the night stretched like elastic. Her hand brushed mine at the corner where the streetlight flickered. A test. A question. I didn't take it. When we reached my door, I hesitated. "I don't do this," I said. "Neither do I," she replied. We stood there, pretending time wasn't a factor. Pretending we were strangers, not two people breaking their own rules. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and cupped my jaw with a hand that was warm, steady, and trembling just slightly. Her thumb brushed my cheek, and I leaned into it before I even knew what I was doing. She kissed me, not soft, not hesitant. It was careful, but sure, like she'd thought about it already and decided it was worth the fallout. I let her kiss me. I kissed her back. And when she pulled away, I whispered, "This is going to ruin everything." She touched her forehead to mine. "Then let's be careful not to break it too fast." I didn't invite her in. I wanted to, but I knew what would happen if I did, or thought I did. I didn't know that restraint would make me think about her every single night for the next week. About the press of her lips, the warmth of her palm, the look in her eyes when she asked if it would scare me. It did. It still does. But something inside me had been shaken loose, and I knew, with alarming clarity, that this wasn't over. Not even close. It started with a single kiss, one moment of heat beneath the quiet fog of restraint, and then we stepped back into our lives, pretending the air between us hadn't shifted. But the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I went back to my quiet apartment, made tea, fed the cat, did the normal things, but everything tasted different, looked different. It was like someone had reached into my chest and turned a dial I didn't know existed. She didn't text. I didn't either. For 5 days. Then, just when I convinced myself it had been a one-time mistake, her name appeared on my screen. Naomi. Coffee. Sunday. No assumptions, no expectations. Just, company? I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I typed, yes. But I picked the place. She replied a minute later with a thumbs-up emoji, followed by, "And you're not allowed to order tea this time." We met at a small cafe tucked behind a bookstore, my favorite kind of hiding place. It smelled like espresso and cinnamon, and something sweet baking in the back. She was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table, no robe, no courtroom composure, just Naomi, in a navy sweater, silver earrings, and dark jeans that clung in ways I tried not to notice. She stood when she saw me, her smile soft, a little nervous. I hadn't expected that, but it melted something inside me. I sat across from her and murmured, "You're early." "I was afraid you'd change your mind," she said. You strike me as the sensible type. I was, I admitted, until about 5 minutes ago. Naomi's eyes searched my face, then dropped to my hands on the table. Are you okay with this? Whatever this is? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for the mug she'd already ordered for me. Black coffee, no sugar, the way she somehow knew I took it. I sipped. It burned. I don't know what this is yet, I finally said, but I don't want it to stop. That was all she needed. What followed wasn't what I expected. It wasn't grand gestures or secret rendezvous. There was no whirlwind, just small things, unfolding. She started texting more, not constantly, but meaningfully. A line from a book, a photo of the sun setting behind the courthouse, a video of her cat knocking over a water glass with the sheer malice of feline spite. I started looking forward to them more than I wanted to admit. Then, one Friday evening, she invited me to her house. Not for dinner, not for anything specific. Just come, she said. No pressure. I told myself I'd stay for an hour. Her house was just like her, composed, elegant, with details you only noticed if you lingered. A candle burned on the kitchen counter, something citrusy and clean. Jazz played low in the background, and she was barefoot, wearing a button-down shirt half untucked and a look that made my breath catch. You came, she said, voice low. You asked. She handed me a glass of wine. I took it. We talked on her couch for a while, about her parents, about how she hated cooking, about how she still sometimes dreams about past cases. Ones she lost, ones she won but didn't feel good about. And I told her things I hadn't told anyone in years. How I'd always been the responsible one, the sister who stayed close to home, the friend who said no. How I'd grown tired of it, of holding everything together, while my own heart lived half asleep. At some point, she reached for my hand. Her thumb brushed my wrist, slow and quiet, and I stopped talking. I think about you, she said, just above a whisper. I turned toward her, heart pounding, even when I shouldn't. I know, I said, and then she kissed me again. This time, I didn't pull away. She tasted like wine and silence, the kind that begs to be broken. Her hands were sure, warm, and gentle all at once. When they slid under my sweater, I gasped. Not from shock, but from the honesty of it. The vulnerability in being wanted, deeply and without apology. We moved slowly, cautiously, like people who knew the cost of being hurt and were still choosing to risk it anyway. She undressed me in pieces, pausing to ask, "Is this okay?" I said yes. When she leaned down and kissed the curve of my hip, the inside of my thigh, I felt my pulse everywhere. She made me feel seen, not admired, not ogled, seen. And I wanted to see her too, beneath the robes and the perfect control. I wanted to know how she felt when she wasn't leading, wasn't hiding. That night, we didn't sleep much. Not because we kept going, but because after, when our bodies were still and tangled in her linen sheets, we couldn't stop touching, talking, breathing each other in. At one point, she ran a hand along my spine and whispered, "I haven't felt this peaceful in years." I said nothing, just kissed her again. Slowly, like I wanted to remember how her mouth tasted when she was finally safe enough to say things like that. The next morning, I wore one of her shirts while we made eggs. She teased me about how serious I looked reading the back of the seasoning jar. "You always look like you're solving something," she said, smiling into her coffee. "I am," I replied, "trying to figure out how this is real." Her smile faded just slightly. "It's real. That's what makes it dangerous." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to, because part of me already knew. What we had, whatever this was becoming, couldn't stay in the shadows forever. Not with her job. Not with mine. And definitely not in a city that gossiped harder than it governed. But that morning, with her arms around me and the scent of eggs and coffee filling her kitchen, I allowed myself one brief, dangerous wish. That maybe, just maybe, this time I wouldn't have to give up something beautiful to survive. We tried to keep things quiet. At first, it was easy. We lived in different circles. Naomi with her judicial robes and controlled public life, and me with my overstretched caseload and anonymous community center office. No one expected us to overlap, so no one looked too closely. But the walls started to close in. It wasn't just the risk, it was the silence. I couldn't mention her to my friends. She couldn't introduce me at the Bar Association fundraiser. We existed in doorways, in early morning texts, in the breathless space between responsibility and desire. And I was starving for more. The first crack came during a team meeting at work. My colleague Lena had seen me at a coffee shop downtown, the one Naomi and I had started frequenting on slow Sundays. She'd spotted me laughing, head tilted toward a woman she hadn't recognized. "She looked important," Lena said, nudging me with a grin. "You dating someone?" My pulse stuttered. I smiled, thin, non-committal. "Just a friend." But that night, I sat on Naomi's couch with a glass of wine I barely touched and confessed, "Someone saw us." She didn't flinch. "Did they say anything?" But it won't stay quiet forever." She set her glass down and looked at me with those dark eyes that never missed a thing. "Do you want to stop?" I shook my head instantly. "Then we don't," she said simply. "Let them talk when they talk. I won't apologize for being with you." It should have calmed me, but it didn't. Because a week later, someone did talk. I don't know who started it. A whisper in the courthouse. A coworker who knew a clerk who saw a text. The rumor spread fast. And then came the email. An anonymous complaint. Someone questioning Naomi's impartiality in court cases. Specifically, mine. Citing concern about the nature of her relationship with a former defendant. That word, defendant, made me feel cold. Like I was no longer a person, but a liability. Naomi was summoned for a formal inquiry. I wasn't. But I showed up anyway, sitting 2 floors below her hearing, staring at my untouched coffee, my stomach in knots. She didn't come down afterward. That night, she came to my apartment. Her face was pale, jaw tight. She dropped her coat on the chair and sat on the edge of my bed, hands clasped between her knees. "They're not pressing anything. No real evidence. Just noise," she said. "But the implication's out there now. It doesn't go away." I sat beside her, not touching, just listening. She looked at me then, and it wasn't the judge or the composed woman I'd first seen in court. It was Naomi, unmasked, tired, scared. "I don't regret you," she said softly. "Not for a second." I reached for her hand. "Then we figure it out." But she didn't squeeze back. We didn't break up. Not exactly. But we stopped making plans. The messages came slower. The invitations stopped. She started saying things like, "I'm just really busy right now," and "You don't need this kind of stress." And one night, she didn't answer my call. I stared at the phone in my hand like it had betrayed me. That week, I stopped by the coffee shop alone. The barista gave me a sad smile. I didn't order anything. I just sat. In our booth. Staring at the space she used to fill. Then one night, I got a call from Naomi's sister. They were close. I'd met her once, briefly. She'd seemed warm, curious, amused that Naomi had let someone in. "She's not okay," she said. "She's been shutting everyone out. I thought maybe, if you still care." I didn't even grab a coat. I arrived at her house breathless, the cold air still clinging to my skin. Naomi opened the door slowly, as if she wasn't sure she'd imagined the doorbell. Her eyes were rimmed with red. Her hair was pulled into a haphazard knot. She wore an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder, exposing the line of her collarbone and the familiar hollow beneath it. "You came," she said, voice cracked. "I never left," I whispered. That night was different. There was no pretense, no playfulness. We didn't rip clothes off in a burst of passion. We peeled them away slowly, like layers of grief. She cried when I touched her, not sobbing, not broken, just tears, leaking silent and warm as I kissed her mouth, her throat, her chest. When I sank into her, her hands clutched me with a desperation that went beyond pleasure. It was survival. It was memory. It was everything we hadn't said, spoken in the language of skin and breath and stillness. Afterward, she curled against me like she had nowhere else in the world to be. And maybe she didn't. In the morning, she sat at the kitchen table with a mug in both hands and said, "I don't want to hide anymore." I waited. I requested a transfer, out of trial court, into policy. I blinked. "Is that what you want?" "It's not what I planned," she said, "but I'm tired of living like I owe the world something for my worth. I want something for me." She looked at me. "I want you." It didn't fix everything. Gossip lingered. So did doubt. But it changed something. We started going out together. No more hiding. No more sitting on opposite ends of the room. When people stared, we let them. When someone made a snide comment at a legal mixer, Naomi didn't flinch. "She's brilliant," she said, hand on my back. "And she's with me. If that bothers you, I suggest a different room." Months passed. She took the transfer. I applied for a new role at a nonprofit focused on family justice reform. We moved in together, her sleek condo and my mismatched books colliding in awkward beauty. One night, after dinner and laughter and a little too much wine, she pulled a small velvet box from her drawer. "This isn't about rings," she said. "It's about choosing." I opened the box. It was empty. I looked at her, confused. "I want us to fill it," she said, "with something that means us. Not what anyone expects, just us." I smiled and kissed her and said yes.